Welcome to the Elephant TV. My name is Abdullahi, and our guest today is Dr. Abduba Mollu. Abdub is a governance and devolution expert. Welcome to the Elephant TV, Abdub.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, what I really would want to start is from, when devolution was first rolled out under the 2010 Katiba. Many northern counties, many people in northern counties celebrated. But I think, a few years down the road, there seems to be a lot of complaint about devolution over the last 10 years. Could you speak to some of the missed opportunities that have led to the disappointment?
We cannot talk about missed opportunities without looking at the context where the ASALs and most of northern Kenya find themselves at the turn of 2010 constitution. We need to go back a little bit behind to connect the dots. Before independence in this country, most of North was locked out, was a closed district, was managed marginally, and probably managed not to interfere with the way the Mzungu was running his affairs. So very little presence, very little infrastructure development in that area. And at the turn of independence, you know the history of most of the North. The NFD was in war with this country. There was a lot of fighting between 63 and 1967. We had the Shifter War. And the net result of that was that a lot of people were killed, a lot of properties were destroyed. And then the country was, after 1967, was in effect also a closed country. It was marginalized. There was a policy, a silent policy of not interfering with anything in the North. And it was left to its own elements in terms of insecurity. Even for the rest of Kenyans, going to the North was like signing a death ticket for them. So yeah, a lot of that. And then the policy immediately after independence of systematic marginalization was also instrumentally put in place through the sessional paper number 10. So when the 2010 constitution came and we had devolution in it in 3 years later, it was like the North was starting. This is when the North actually started to believe that they are part of Kenya. The rest of the time, what we were seeing was military presence, police, government. It wasn't really, we didn't feel to be part of the country. Yes, we participated in a lot of national processes, elections and all that, but really, so there was a lot of enthusiasm, there was a lot of expectation from the people in the ASALs and in the North specifically around the issues of what would devolution do. And remember, this was also very much hyped during the orange banana debate that, this is the panacea. Once we have devolution, all our problems are solved. So for the first governments that came in 2013, they were actually in real sense starting on a clean slate in most of the North. I remember discussions around even where do we place the offices. Most of the governors didn't even have offices to start with. In other counties, you had the provincial administration, you had the district administration, more or less they had infrastructure to start with. As we speak, most of the counties in the North are still establishing themselves, offices and facilities and all of that. So one of the missed opportunity was you are given this open check kind of to design how development should look like for your people. You had the instruments, of course, with all the limitations of being within a national framework, you had some leeway to design development for your people. And remember, the leaders of this are locals. They are people elected. So all the problems you used to talk about, now you are told, okay, here is the resources, put it into perspective, give us development. So what did our leaders do with that? They ended up squandering that big time, in my view. They failed to put the foundations of government. So they went into office. The first thing is you are trying to employ a lot of people, putting in, imaginary and non-existent positions, a lot of positions, directors, departments, just copying what was in the national government framework without thinking through. I am in the north. I have a vast area. A lot of my people need a lot of the basics. So a lot of effort was being burnt establishing a government which looks like a government in Kiambu or in Muranga or in Kakamega, replica of the same. The first generation CIDPs, which were the community county integrated development plans, were supposed to be an expression of new vision, but they ended up becoming, wish list.
What can the counties do within the limitation of what the law and resources allows the counties to do?
The North, for all intent and purpose, is actually the new frontier for development. Why? Because one, it has abundant natural resources. The largest wind farm in this country sits in Marsabit, in Lake Turkana, and that largest wind farm is an example of what can be done in terms of energy. You have untapped mineral resources in this region that could open up economically this area. You have large tracts of land across most of this area with proper irrigation mechanism, new technology using solar and wind. You can mechanize agriculture and produce huge amounts of exportable produce, vegetables, fruits. So opportunities are many, even in the traditional sector of livestock. Even within the livestock sector, with all its challenges, the livestock sector currently is probably underreported, but is probably matches tea, coffee, and tourism, in its contribution to national GDP. But what investment do we have in that sector? Even without zero or very minimal investment in that sector, it is already matching this. What would happen if the investment matches what is invested in coffee, in tea, in tourism, and horticulture? I don't want to imagine that, because there is huge potential even in that traditional sector with just a little bit of support. Every 2 or 3 years, like we've had this last year, end of last year, and even up to now, we talk of drought, and drought is preventable. Drought emergency need not to happen, but we've been having that cycle since before independence, and we're not getting out of it. So there's huge economic opportunity. There is huge potential in terms of the new energy, the new economic growth is in the north. But to harness that, number one, we need to unlock a number of issues. First, we have to deal with the issue of infrastructure. The road network is deplorable. Up until recently, you can go only as far as Isiolo. The rest of northern Kenya was completely a closed area. Now we have the road running all the way to Moyale, but that's only one. We are not connected. Mandera is not connected to Marsabit. Marsabit is not connected to Turkana or Samburu, and all of that. So the road network is critical to that. Energy, despite the fact that energy now is coming from that end, none of that is actually being plowed back into the area. I understand the energy comes back to all the way somewhere in, I don't know where, and then it is redistributed. Probably flying over a lot of areas which do not have
Electricity.
So there is a lot of that communication infrastructure. The area is not well connected to telecommunication. That could also open up a lot of opportunities, even in terms of unlocking potentials for the local people and for the country. So those needs to be done. And finally, Abdullah, in my view, we don't walk the talk when it comes to investment in the North. Why do I say so? You know, for the last 10 years, maybe more than 10 years now, probably 15, 20 years, we've been talking of LAPSSET. You know, LAPSSET is dragging along when mega infrastructure around central Kenya are being unveiled every day. You know, the road connection, the dual carriage road from Kenol here all the way to Embu and all the way to Nyeri is almost complete. You get it. So we talk about LAPSSET as if it's the panacea, but in truth, we are not putting money where our mouth is. So if this is done, I can tell you, this main network from Mombasa to Namanga would be dwarfed by what would happen with the economic opportunity if the LAPSSET opens up Lamu to Ethiopia to South Sudan and beyond.
How do these institutions interact, and what are some of the advantages that can be drawn from either, from your experience?
What has held these areas together, despite all the challenges, is the local institutional framework, what we call the traditional institutions. Every community has some form of councils of elders. There are also local institutions in charge of certain resources, whether it is water, whether it is pasture. The Boran, for example, have a very resilient institutional framework called the data councils. The data councils, for all intent and purpose, help to manage the range resource use. So if, for example, a community in another corner of the area are in need to access pasture and water or safe passage to areas beyond their areas, they will then engage with these councils. They will then negotiate how to utilize these resources, basically sharing, because tomorrow this community will need this same passage or will need this lifeline to overcome the vagaries of the environment they find themselves in. Over time, these institutions, as resilient as they are, have been watered down. They have been weakened by the modern institutions that we've put in place, the chief system, the provincial administration, and now also with devolution, we've come up with new structures, ward councils. We've come up with the office of the member of county assembly. All these institutions are not well aligned with the traditional institution. But one of the things that are rarely talked about, which is also another missed opportunity, is that devolution does not only bring money to us. Devolution also gives us powers to create institutions through laws, through the county assembly. So one of the big opportunities within the range management spectrum, or all of the other sectors within the pastoral areas, is that how do the county assemblies ensure that they have entrenched and formalized these traditional institutions so that then they are recognized in law and they are also facilitated by the county resources. Because once you set up a law, for example, a range management law, which helps you to identify areas you're going to preserve for dry areas, you'll identify areas for milk cows, the functions that used to be done by the traditional elders, these can be institutionalized through laws. And then these institutions are mandated to run these functions formally. I don't subscribe to this jurisdiction where you have the formal structures and then the informal infrastructure, because usually the formal institutions would overrun the informal institutions. So one of the ways is to formalize them, to recognize them, give them the role, which they're already playing, recognize it in law, and give them also institutional resources, where if they need to meet, if they want to hold sessions, they are also facilitated the same way a committee in a different ministry is also facilitated because they play a very fundamental role in society.
How do you see these two questions of accountability, where yes, a lot of money comes into the, ASAL counties, and we know that yes, there are corruption, of course, there are corruption also at the national level, but then there is also the question of equity. 35%, these counties are seeing more resources now over the last 2 cycles than they have seen since independence over 40, 50 years now. How do you see these two issues, equity and accountability, when it comes to the resource sharing?
One of the things we must not lose sight of is that our architecture as a nation, as a country, is informed by the desire by the people in power to control resources to benefit certain areas at the expense of others. This has been with us since the Kanu Majimbo, Kadu days. It has been with us recently when we were having the BBI. So this is going to be part of our life, and we should always be conscious of it. Yes, devolution created some window for certain areas which never used to have entitlements, but that does not prevent others from clawing back the benefits they have enjoyed for the last 50, 60 years. Remember, the centralists, or what I call the nationalists in this country, have continued to enjoy unfairly control of decisions over resources. And they have unfairly allocated those resources in areas where they are. And they are using that now against the people who never used to enjoy that. So this is a debate about equity, but about also what makes the nation. There are people who believe that it is okay to eat on behalf of the other. And I think that debate is a debate that we will continue to have, and I'm not going to see that it's going to go away. The biggest casualty of that debate would be devolution, if it ever happens. But the beauty of this is that devolution supports everyone. It doesn't support certain areas. So it's not a northern agenda. Devolution is as much a Kiambu agenda as it is a Turkana agenda, as it is a Lamu agenda. So in that sense, we have a bit of comfort in that sense. But what it means, what this tells you is that we have a leadership at the national level who are still thinking village, who are still thinking region. And unless we get out of that, this debate will not leave us. The discussion around misuse of resources is again around these discussions around institutions. Our institutions that fights corruptions, that fights impunity in this country are nascent. They are centrally controlled. They are abused. Criminals can still buy their way out of, and that is what is happening to corruption today. That we have institutions that are not strong enough. We have individuals that are put there by powers that be that are not accountable to their office, they're accountable to the appointing authority. Unless we solve that, we are not going to solve the problem of corruption, both at the local level and at the national level. But my way of looking at this is that better a devolved corruption than a centralized corruption. I go around this country a lot and I see some change. I am not fully convinced that there is a lot of change, but I see some change and I'm happy with those changes. More could be done, but let's not use the mallet of corruption to kill the good that is in devolution. Let's fight corruption by evolving institutions at the lower level that can fight corruption at the lower level.
What do you see as the main issues, or should be the main front and center issues in ASAL region for these regions to be transformed or go into the next level and benefit from the fruits of devolution?
Abdullah, this is one question that is probably the most difficult one for our area, partly because our politics, as much as we say all politics is local, is very much nationally controlled. You know, we have individuals, those of us who have benefited from the benefits of education, the benefits of being able to get out of the North, and are the ones now controlling the discourse. They are the ones controlling what happens at home. And a lot of these individuals are adapting their way of doing things to the local dynamics. You've heard of the so-called negotiated democracy, you know, sounds very well, sounds very nice,
yeah,
and innovative. When I speak about negotiated democracy to non-northerners, they find it very attractive. You know, they find it a very equitable way of doing things. But the fact of the matter is that it is still the elite, you know, the elite who wants to retain power, who are organizing these negotiations. You know, it's actually a misnomer, because, you know, when you are negotiating a democracy with a few, then you lock out the voice of the many, then it's not a democracy anymore.
It's not a negotiation, so neither is it
I am not
democracy.
Going to see a lot of change.
Yeah.
It's
never exactly. A negotiation, so, and it's never a democracy.
It's true. So to your question now, I'm not very hopeful with a lot of change in the North, simply because, one, nationally, this is probably one or the most, the election in this country where you are not hoping for any change. You know, either way you look at it, you know, you are not looking at any change. Number two, in the North, we have those governors who were second-term governors who are now calling the shots, who are almost determining who becomes a governor after they leave the office. Okay, so change might be stage managed in this manner. Secondly, you have also first-time governors who want to go back as second-term governors, who now have resources and probably will edge out. So there is very little competition, in my view. There are very little options on the table. A lot of monies are exchanging hands within the elders for them to declare a preferred candidate. And most of the time, that declaration carries the day. So in that sense, we are going to go into this election without actually exercising our right to vote. We are going to go through the motion. We're going to spend a lot of money. We're going to spend there will be a lot of noise, probably a few gunshots and maybe casualties in some spots. But I don't foresee, in my view, that there will be real change that we will be hopeful for. What we could be hopeful for is that probably the institutions that will hold these offices accountable would become more vibrant post August 2022.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mollu, for being with us, and I hope some of our listeners have benefited.
Thank you for having me.
For this and other Elephant conversations, follow The Elephant on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter at The Elephant. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to The Elephant, also on our YouTube channel by clicking on the link below.